The staff at Maple Ridge Rescue had stopped trying to handle the dog weeks ago. No one could get close. Volunteers called him Ghost because of how he moved. Silent, distant, always pressed into the back corner of his kennel like he was trying to disappear into the wall. No records, no name, just a burned patch of fur along his side, scars along his legs, and a look in his eyes that kept people from even trying. Every day he watched them feed him, watched them clean the floors, watched them try with other dogs, dogs that barked, jumped, wagged their tails, and begged for attention. Ghost never did. He didn't growl, didn't bare his teeth. He just stared. And then there was the leash. No one could put one on him, not without a full-body flinch and a lunge that sent 3 experienced handlers stumbling backward the first time they tried. Since then, the staff left his door open during cleaning and waited for him to retreat to the corner before slipping in with food or water. No one blamed him. Someone, somewhere, had taught him that hands meant pain. Dr. Talia. Rourke had seen worse, but something about this dog haunted her. She was used to trauma, the kind that clung to animals long after the wounds healed. But Ghost didn't flinch like a dog afraid of being hurt. He flinched like one who'd been betrayed, and betrayal was harder to fix. He's not broken, she told her team during rounds one morning. He's just waiting for something that feels real, but none of them knew what that could possibly be. That week, a new volunteer application crossed her desk. The file was unusual, handwritten, in blocky, wobbly letters, and attached to a crayon drawing of a big brown dog and a little kid sitting on the grass. The signature at the bottom was scrawled in red marker. From Finn, age 5. I want to meet a sad dog so he not sad anymore. Talia raised an eyebrow. The official application attached was from the boy's mother, Rowan Ames, a burn unit nurse, who'd recently relocated after a family trauma. There wasn't much detail, just a short note. Finn was injured last spring. He's healing. This is his idea. I said yes because it's the first thing he's wanted to do in months. Normally, children weren't allowed in the clinic zone, but Talia looked at the drawing again, at the careful way Finn had colored the dog's eyes a pale blue, and paused. Ghost's eyes were that same impossible shade. 2 days later, Rowan arrived, at the shelter holding Finn's hand. The boy was small, slight for his age, and wrapped in gauze from wrist to elbow on both arms. He wore a bright green dinosaur backpack and a determined look on his face. Talia introduced herself softly and knelt to his level. You want to meet a dog who's having a hard time? Finn nodded. Mommy says I know how that feels. Rowan placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. He hasn't spoken to anyone since the hospital, but he drew that picture. He knows something. Talia hesitated. Every instinct as a vet told her this was dangerous. But something deeper, something older and quieter, whispered that maybe the boy knew something the rest of them didn't. So she led them to the back wing. The corridor was silent. Most dogs barked when visitors passed. Ghost didn't. He just stared through the bars as they approached. Tail still, body pressed to the floor. Finn didn't flinch. He let go of his mom's hand, stepped up to the kennel, and sat cross-legged on the floor without a word. Ghost watched him. For the first few minutes, no one spoke. Finn didn't reach out, didn't coo or whistle. He just sat. Then quietly he whispered, I think your name is Cooper. Talia blinked. Ghost twitched. It wasn't much, just a flick of his ears and a blink of those glassy blue eyes, but it was the first movement he'd made that wasn't retreat. Finn nodded to himself. Cooper is a brave name. You look brave. Rowan's breath caught. Talia knelt slowly beside the boy. Finn, why that name? The child didn't take his eyes off the dog. Because that's what I called the dog in my hospital room. He wasn't real, but he stayed with me when I had the surgeries. Talia's voice faltered. And you think this dog is like him? Finn finally looked at her. No, I think this is him. Cooper, Ghost, shifted, slowly, carefully. He didn't stand, but he uncurled slightly, lifting his head off the floor for the first time. And then, in one long, deliberate movement, he crept forward, not to Talia or Rowan, but to Finn. The boy didn't move. Cooper paused at the bars, eyes flicking from the boy's face to the gauze on his arms. Then he laid down, nose pressed against the kennel door. Talia's hand flew to her chest. Rowan was already crying. Finn just smiled, leaned in, and whispered, It's okay, you don't have to be scared anymore, I'm not either. No one spoke for a long time, because something irreversible had happened in that moment. The untouchable had chosen. Not an adult, not a handler, not a vet, but a 5-year-old boy wrapped in bandages who had once survived fire and had come to Return the favor. The shelter staff didn't say much when the security footage was reviewed the next morning. They didn't need to. Everyone had already heard. The dog they couldn't approach, couldn't even name, had crawled to the edge of his kennel the moment a 5-year-old boy sat down and spoke his name. No one had ever seen anything like it. It wasn't just the movement. It was the intent behind it. Controlled, deliberate. Cooper hadn't lunged, hadn't barked. He had listened. Talia stood in the observation room watching the grainy black and white playback again. She watched Finn sit cross-legged on the cold concrete without fidgeting, without fear. She watched Cooper slide forward inch by inch until his nose touched the gate. Then she rewound the footage and watched it again. And again. Rowan, Finn's mother, arrived later that morning with a small container of sliced apples and peanut butter. She looked tired, but lighter than before. "He's been asking to come back since we left," she said. "He wanted to bring something for his new friend." Talia smiled, though her voice was careful. "We need to be slow. Cooper's still not stable. We don't know how much he can handle." Rowan nodded. "I know. But Finn, he's steady in a way I can't explain. The surgery's changed him. There were days he didn't speak at all. Then one night, he whispered the name Cooper in his sleep. I thought it was just a dream." Talia led them back through the clinic wing, past the quieter kennels, where the more reactive dogs were kept. Cooper's door had been reinforced, but no one had touched it since yesterday. He was awake, head resting against the floor, eyes already tracking the sound of approaching footsteps. When he saw Finn, he lifted his chin. Not much, but enough. Finn walked over, lowered himself to the same spot he'd chosen before, and opened the container. "I brought snacks," he said softly, "but you don't have to take them yet. I just wanted you to know they're here." Cooper didn't move, but his ears twitched. Rowan leaned in toward Talia. "Yesterday, I saw the scar along his ribs." "Is it burned?" Talia confirmed. "Old injury, maybe years ago. Could have been chemical, could have been fire, but he has other signs. Pressure sores, crate damage, frostbite scarring on the tail. He wasn't just abandoned, he was kept somewhere dark, somewhere no one was supposed to find him." Rowan didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "So was Finn." Finn was still talking, still calm. He had no script, no cue cards, just his own memory and instinct. "I used to be afraid to eat. It hurt when I moved. I didn't want anyone to look at my arms. I thought they were broken forever. But Mommy said broken doesn't mean gone." Cooper let out a soft breath through his nose, and then, impossibly, he shifted forward. He stretched one leg toward the bars. His paw didn't reach the edge, but it moved in Finn's direction. The staff, watching from the camera room, gasped. One tech whispered, "He's never reached for anyone." Finn reached into the container and pulled out an apple slice, gently laying it just outside the kennel gate. He didn't push it in, didn't test the boundary. He just left it there, folded his hands on his knees, and waited. Cooper didn't touch the treat, but he didn't turn away either. That evening, after Rowan and Finn had gone home, Talia sat in the shelter's break room, running notes through the database. Every time she tried to update Cooper's profile, she paused, not because she didn't have the details, but because nothing on the form could explain what had happened. She added a sentence to his file under behavioral notes. Dog responded with physical proximity to young child. First, voluntary movement observed. She hesitated, then wrote one more line. Child called him Cooper. Dog responded to name. Recommend testing further. The next day, Finn came back. This time, he brought a book. He didn't ask to open the kennel. He didn't ask to pet. He simply sat and read out loud. A story about a dog named Max who protected his family from a thunderstorm. Cooper lay with his head down the entire time, eyes half-lidded but focused, and then, just as Finn finished the final line, Cooper did something that made the entire staff freeze. He barked, just once. Short, low, not aggressive, but a response. Finn smiled and looked up. "That means you liked the ending." Rowan turned away, tears slipping down her cheek. Talia stood in stunned silence. He hasn't made a single sound since arriving. And then, in the quiet that followed, Cooper rose to his feet, not in a panic, not to run, but to stand in front of the gate. He pressed his forehead gently against the bars and closed his eyes. Finn didn't move closer. He simply reached his tiny, bandaged hand forward and placed it on the opposite side of the metal. The two of them stayed like that, boy and dog, scarred and silent, bridged by something no trauma could erase. Recognition, trust, and the beginning of something neither of them had believed they'd feel again. Hope. The word spread through the shelter like wildfire. Cooper had barked, not growled, not whimpered. A real bark, directed at no one. Not out of fear or defense, but because he'd wanted to say something. And not only that, he'd stood in front of a child he didn't know, hadn't been trained to accept, and leaned his head against the kennel gate as if to say, "You found me." No one knew what it meant yet, but everyone knew this wasn't a moment. This was a turning point. The next day, Finn arrived early, and this time he brought crayons, not to color, to give. "I used to draw when I couldn't talk," he told Helen, one of the senior volunteers who had quietly stepped in to watch over their sessions. "Cooper might want to draw his feelings too," Helen smiled. "I think he already is, just not with crayons." Cooper was already awake when Finn reached his kennel. He sat waiting, not in the shadows this time, but at the gate, as if expecting the boy's arrival. He didn't bark, didn't move much, but his tail gave one slow thump against the floor. For a dog who had never wagged once, it was a thunderclap. Finn sat, cross-legged again, and placed a crayon gently near the edge of the bars. He didn't say much at first, just hummed softly, the same tune he always hummed when he needed to feel brave. A song his mom used to sing in the burn unit, when the machines beeped and his skin was raw, and even blinking felt like it might tear. Something open. That song had kept him steady. Now it kept Cooper calm. Halfway through the visit, something changed. Cooper reached forward with his paw, not a stretch, not a reflex, but a soft tap to the crayon Finn had set down. Then he nudged it closer. Finn's eyes lit up. "That's blue," he whispered. "My favorite. Do you like blue?" Cooper blinked. Finn took that as a yes. The staff, watching from the far end of the corridor through the reinforced observation panel, stood frozen. The most traumatized dog they'd ever taken in was now engaging with a child, moving voluntarily, offering contact. And then came the twist no one expected. As Finn stood to leave, gently brushing dust off his knees, he turned back to Cooper and said, "I wish you could come out. I'd let you walk next to me." The moment the words left his mouth, Cooper stepped back, not with fear, with purpose. He moved into the middle of the kennel and sat. It looked like nothing, but it was everything, because the far side of the kennel held the leash hook. Cooper was positioning himself. Finn looked up at the adults. "He's ready." Helen's voice cracked. He wants to try." Talia arrived minutes later, having sprinted across the building after the radio alert. "No one goes in. Not yet," she said, eyes locked on the monitor. "Let's see what happens next." Finn came back the following day with a small piece of rope, one of those braided toddler toys, safe and soft. He knelt just outside the gate, held the rope in both hands and whispered, "This is just pretend, Cooper. If you want to try, I'll stay very still." Cooper didn't hesitate. He walked, carefully, slow but focused, until his nose was just inches from the bars. Then, in a move no one had ever witnessed before, he dipped his head low and placed it against the gate. Finn slid the rope gently across the bars, not tight, not even wrapped, just placed. Cooper didn't flinch. Helen exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. He's surrendering to the leash. Talia didn't respond. Her eyes were glassy. That evening, after the clinic had closed and the volunteers had gone home, Talia sat in the break room, Cooper's file open in front of her. Under behavioral summary, she deleted every line that started with reactive or unapproachable. In its place, she wrote, "Responds to one handler, 5-year-old male, post-trauma patient. Dog now exhibits leash acceptance behaviors, voluntary engagement, demonstrates protective loyalty and emotional synchronization, shows signs of naming attachment, responds exclusively to the name Cooper." That weekend, the shelter board held a private meeting. It wasn't publicized. There were no adoption talks, no interviews. Just one question: what happens now? Helen spoke first. "He's not adoptable, not in the traditional sense. He doesn't respond to adults. Won't be placed in a home with strangers. We'll lose him if we move too fast." Rowan stood next. "Then maybe we stop thinking of him as a project, and we start thinking of him as someone who's already been placed, just not officially." Talia nodded. "He's not waiting for the right home. He's already found it." That afternoon, they called Finn into the clinic. Not his mother, not a counselor, just Finn. He sat beside Cooper's kennel, as always, and waited. Talia approached slowly and handed him a soft cloth harness. "He doesn't have to wear it today, but if he lets you, he can keep it." Finn's eyes widened. "His own jacket?" Talia smiled. "Exactly." Finn took the harness in both hands and turned to Cooper. "Do you want your jacket today?" Cooper stood, walked to the gate, and sat. He let Finn slide the harness over his shoulders without flinching, without fear. Then, he licked the back of Finn's bandaged hand. The staff didn't cheer, they didn't clap, they cried, because a dog who hadn't let anyone touch him now wore a harness given to him by a boy with matching scars. And in that moment, the two of them weren't broken anymore. They were brave. Together. By Monday morning, the shelter had become something else entirely. It no longer felt like a place of rescue alone. It felt like it was holding its breath, as if the walls themselves were waiting for a miracle to unfold. And it was all because of one boy and one dog, both stitched together by quiet resilience, and the kind of hurt that doesn't speak. It just lingers. Cooper was now standing every time Finn entered the room, not pacing, not hiding, standing, tail still low, but no longer curled beneath him, ears forward. The moment he saw the green dinosaur backpack, his gaze would soften, and his body would seem to release some invisible weight. No handler, trainer, or adult had ever gotten close to this. Yet somehow, a 5-year-old with gauze on his arms had cracked the silence that years of suffering had wrapped around Cooper like armor. That day, Finn came in wearing boots. "I want to go for a walk," he said simply, pulling the soft rope harness gently from his backpack and laying it on the floor like it was something sacred. "I think Cooper's ready." Helen looked over at Talia nervously, and Talia raised a brow. "Has he ever walked on leash without freezing?" "Never," Helen whispered. "He usually panics or collapses, but this time would be different." They all felt it. The staff made no announcement. There was no crowd, just a quiet agreement among those who had watched this bond unfold day by day, in stillness and faith. If Cooper took one step with Finn today, that would be enough. More than enough. Rowan stood nearby, heart thudding in her chest. She knew the risks. She had walked this road before, with her son, when he first tried to stand without pain, when every movement reminded him of fire. And yet, just like now, he hadn't stopped. He simply looked at what scared him and whispered, "Okay, let's try." Talia gave a soft nod. "Let's try." They opened the kennel gate. Finn walked in alone, calm and measured, the way he always did. He didn't rush. He didn't reach. He crouched and waited until Cooper stepped forward on his own. Then, with a careful hand, he slid the harness over his head. Cooper didn't flinch. He looked directly at Finn. "You want to come outside now?" the boy asked. Cooper lowered his head, then lifted it again. It wasn't a yes. It was something better. Trust. The leash clipped on with a soft click, and for the first time since he'd arrived at the shelter, Cooper stepped past the threshold of his kennel willingly. Every footfall was deliberate. He didn't bolt, didn't try to flee. He followed. Finn, small, steady Finn, through the corridor, past rows of dogs who fell into silence as he passed, out the back door, into the yard. The sunlight hit Cooper's coat, and for a moment, he froze. His paw hovered over the concrete as if unsure whether to go forward or turn back. Then he looked down at the leash, back at the boy, and stepped into the light. Finn led him toward the small patch of grass near the oak tree, where a picnic blanket had been laid down in quiet hope. He sat cross-legged like he always did, and let the leash rest softly between them. Cooper stood for a moment longer, scanning the yard, nose lifted to the air. Then he lay down beside the boy and exhaled. Not a sigh, a surrender. It was Helen who whispered, "He doesn't want to go back." Talia nodded. "Then we don't make him." For nearly half an hour they stayed like that, Finn tracing patterns in the grass with his fingers, Cooper resting with one paw on the leash, the other across Finn's ankle. No tension, no need for words. It was Rowan who broke the silence. His name, that first day, she said softly to Talia. It wasn't random. Finn didn't pull it. From nowhere, Talia looked over, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Rowan swallowed, eyes fixed on her son. "The dog Finn imagined during recovery. He called him Cooper. Every time we had to change his bandages, every time it hurt so bad he couldn't speak, he would close his eyes and whisper that name. That imaginary Cooper would sit beside his bed and protect him. I thought it was just something his mind made. Up to cope." Talia's voice cracked. "Maybe it wasn't imaginary." Rowan nodded. "Maybe this whole time Cooper was looking for the boy who had already loved him before they'd even met." Back in the yard, Finn gently placed his hand on Cooper's back. The dog didn't move, just blinked slowly, his whole body still against the grass. And then, from inside the shelter window, something happened that froze every staff member in place. Another dog barked, a loud one, and Cooper didn't flinch. He turned his head, but instead of cowering, he shifted closer to Finn. Everyone watching knew what that meant. He had found his safe place, not a space, not a crate, a person. Later that evening, after the sun had dipped behind the trees and Finn had gone home, Cooper walked calmly back into his kennel on his own. No dragging, no resistance. And when Talia closed the gate gently behind him, she swore she saw something flicker in his eyes, something like peace. She updated his file that night. Cooper walked on leash, sat calmly in open space, showed no aggression, no avoidance, sought comfort from his handler. No signs of residual trauma in presence of triggering sounds. Recommendation: initiate emotional support animal evaluation. Then, at the bottom of the page, she added one more line. Handler name: Finn Ames, age 5, status: chosen. It had been 12 days since Cooper's first walk, 12 days since he stepped outside his kennel on his own, since he followed the boy with the bandaged arms into the sunlight and lay down beside him like he'd been doing it his entire life. But each day since, something small, something real, had shifted. First it was the tail thump whenever Finn's voice echoed down the corridor. Then came the quiet nudges against the boy's side, the curious glances toward passing staff. Cooper was still cautious, still slow, but the fear in his eyes had dimmed, not vanished, but softened, like a shadow receding in the presence of something stronger than it. Safety. And it wasn't just Cooper who was changing. Finn spoke more now, not just to Cooper, but to the staff, to the other dogs, to the world. His words were soft and simple, but they were steady. Talia noticed it one afternoon when he stood near the recovery wing and told a trembling puppy, "It doesn't hurt forever. I used to think it would. But then it got better." The puppy had stopped shaking. So had Helen, standing behind the glass. That same week, Finn made a quiet request no one expected. "Can Cooper come home now?" Rowan, who had heard the question whispered in passing a dozen times before, went still. She met Talia's eyes. "Do you think he's ready?" Talia didn't answer immediately. She turned and looked down the hall, where Cooper sat calmly in front of Finn, letting the boy braid 2 strands of leash together, as if it were just another quiet morning between best friends. Then she nodded. "He's not just ready. He's already there." The adoption paperwork was signed the next day. No ceremony, no press release. Just a folded packet in Talia's hands and one simple signature beneath the line marked Adoptive Guardian, Rowan Ames, on behalf of Finn Ames. That evening, the entire shelter stood still as Cooper was brought to the front doors on his leash. He didn't resist. He didn't hesitate. He simply walked beside Finn like he belonged nowhere else in the world, because he didn't. The second the doors opened, Finn turned back and waved. "Thank you for keeping him safe," he said. "He's going to help keep me safe now, too." Helen, standing at the counter, wiped her cheek and whispered, "He already has." Life at home didn't begin with fanfare. It began with silence and space. Rowan prepared a quiet corner of the living room with Cooper's bed, placed Finn's old stuffed animals nearby, and hung the harness on a special hook beside the door. She didn't expect miracles. But what followed in the coming weeks was nothing short of that. Cooper adjusted faster than anyone predicted. He ate when Finn did, slept near his bed. When Rowan changed Finn's bandages, Cooper lay with his head across the boy's lap, unmoving, calm. When the nightmares came, it wasn't Rowan who got there first. It was Cooper, pressing his cold nose to Finn's cheek until the boy stirred, then curling against him like a blanket made of heartbeat and muscle. And one night, something remarkable happened. Finn had left his sketchbook on the coffee table, one filled with drawings of him and Cooper in all kinds of imagined adventures, flying planes, diving into the ocean, exploring caves. That night, when Rowan picked it up to put it away, she noticed a new page. In crayon, drawn with the same steady hand that once trembled too much to hold a spoon, was an image of Cooper curled up beneath a big oak tree, and sitting beside him, smiling, was a boy with no bandages, just scars and light. A few days later, Rowan emailed the shelter with a photo. It showed Finn lying in the grass with Cooper resting his head on the boy's stomach, both of them bathed in afternoon sunlight. In the background, the leash sat beside them, unused. Her message read, "He doesn't wear the harness anymore." He sighed. "Doesn't need it. Neither does Finn." They walk side by side now. No one leads. No one follows. They just go. Talia printed it out and pinned it to the bulletin board in the clinic hallway. Below it, she wrote one final line. The boy found his voice. The dog found his home. Together, they found their peace. Months passed, then seasons, and Cooper, the dog no one could touch, became the dog who watched over playgrounds, who curled beside reading chairs, who carried Finn's backpack on walks. And Finn, once too fragile to speak, now told stories about the dog who saved him from being scared of the dark. Not just the one outside, but the one that lived inside his chest. They grew together, healed together, because sometimes all it takes to bring something broken back to life is someone who doesn't see the brokenness at all, just the part that deserves to be held and whispered back to wholeness.